Hey guys, welcome back. In this tutorial I'm going to go over some common mistakes that people tend to make when they're starting out in After Effects. Now, given that I teach this, I've been teaching After Effects to students for the past 4 or 5 years or so, I'm used to seeing some particular mistakes kind of throughout. Okay, so I'm going to go over the kind of 5 most common mistakes I see when students are starting out. So, first one is case-sensitive expressions. Now, when I'm talking and teaching about expressions to students, quite often they can't understand or they don't get their head around that if you put a incorrect sort of capital somewhere, then it won't kind of work. So let's say for this we just want to do a simple wiggle expression. As you know, we alt-click the stopwatch and we type wiggle, open brackets, then 5 times a second by 100 pixels and close brackets. Click off, that works, okay? Now, quite often what students will do is they'll put a little space here, and depending on where you put the space, sometimes you will get a little error, like especially if you put it between here, obviously. Now, what they'll often do as well is put a capital W, and then they'll be like, oh, why isn't this wiggle working? Well, it's because you don't want to put capitals, okay? And just by taking it out, now it's working. So yeah, that's one thing. When you do the loop-in expressions, so let's cancel that. Let's just do a little keyframe by here at the beginning. Come back to the beginning. Delete that, sorry. So let's start up here, and let's go to 1 second and do that. So we've got like a little expression there. Now with the loop-in expression, basically, you want to type loop in lowercase. Let's say we're going to loop out, capital 0, UT, then open and close brackets, and that will loop this expression. Now, what a lot of people kind of can't get their head around is that you do need, if you're looping in or out, at the beginning of the word in or out, that needs to be a capital. All you need to do is just remember that. Okay, so let's offset these now so you can see this loop working. It loops from the beginning until the end of this keyframe here and then stops. Now, as we're on the subject of looping, there is another loop I want to show you, and it's to kind of animate between back and forth like these, and it's called loop out and then ping pong. So in these brackets you can type the words ping pong. Now it just means it goes back and forth between these. Now if I click off, it's going to give you an error. It's not going to do that loop, it's going to give you this error. And the reason being, it likes these little apostrophes by here as well. And that just, that's something which people always quite often forget, is within these brackets it wants this for this expression. And the more you learn expressions, the more complex expressions you learn, you'll learn exactly why they need this. But just for the simple ones, when you're following a tutorial, you just want to make sure that you're seeing where the capitals are, where the spaces are, where the kind of these little apostrophes are, just so you get that. And that's a nice little expression I use quite a lot actually, loop out ping pong. And you can always do the other loop in ping pong. So what that'll do is it'll do the ping pong until it gets to the end of these keyframes. So it'll stop once it hits the end there. Okay, so let's move on to double click in layers. Now this I've seen very, very often. So I've got a footage layer by here with curves and a turbulent displace on there. This turbulent displace is linked to this fractal noise, which I've just turned off. And students will think, oh, this layer is selected, so I want to modify this layer. So they'll often double click it, and then it opens up in the layer panel, and they're like, oh, I've lost work, all the effects have gone. Well, when you double click a layer, normally you're viewing the composition with all the effects on there. When you double click a layer, it opens it up in the layer window, and it's just the layer without any effects. Now you can choose to view certain effects, like just the curves or just the turbulent displace, stuff like that. But you know, quite often they'll have the view will be none, and they're double clicking and they're like, oh, where's all my effects gone? Why aren't these effects on there? It's because you've double clicked the layer and you're in the layer window. So just check up the top that you're in not in the layer window. You want to be in the composition one. Just check that, and if you see this bar up the bottom, that's a big giveaway that you're in the wrong window. So you just need to go back to composition, and here it is. Okay, so don't double click layers. If you do, opens it up. Double click this black solid, open it up here, and you're like, oh, well, what's going on? Why can't I modify it? Well, you need to come into here, composition window. Okay, pretty simple one, but it happens quite a lot when people are starting out. I remember when I was starting out, I did it a lot as well. Now, this is one which you think where it says forgetting to set keyframes. It's quite common, this one, to be honest, as well. What a lot of students will do is they'll be like, oh yeah, I want my position at 0 seconds to be here, then I want to come across, animate it to bounce there, then at 2 seconds I want it to come here, and then they go to play it back and they're like, oh, what's going on? They always forget to set their keyframes. First, when you set, you just got to make sure you click the stopwatch, and then you come forward and then you start moving it. But what people often do is they think, I've moved it now, so I want to click the stopwatch again. If you do that, it deletes all of them, and then they kind of keep on going through. Oh, hit the stopwatch, go through, and then they go to hit the stopwatch every time, and it just gets rid of them. So all you need to remember, hit the stopwatch first, then move forward, and you can just click and drag, and you don't have to do that stopwatch ever again. It manually does it then. Okay, awesome. Moving on is next. So next is creating shapes instead of masks, or vice versa. So let's say you want to mask this piece of footage. Well, you can get this pen tool, and when the layer is selected, highlighted, you can then click and it'll mask off the footage, so you'll just see it in there, and then you've got your mask properties by here. Okay, now what people often kind of get mixed up with is, let's delete this mask. If I were to start clicking and drawing with this layer not selected and go like that, well, it creates a shape then, or why is it creating a shape? It's because you didn't draw it when this was selected. So all you need to remember, if you want to mask a piece of footage, get the pen tool, but make sure that layer is selected so it knows which layer it applies the mask to, and it does it. And if you want to draw, let's say you just want to draw a shape on top of the footage, get the pen tool, but make sure the layer isn't selected, so click off. And now, see when I click on and off, up here the options change. So when I click off it, it gives you the option for fill color. Okay, and that's when you're going to create a shape. Okay, pretty simple one again, but I used to make that mistake a lot when I started out. So just make sure, if you're masking footage, make sure that footage is selected. If you're drawing a shape, make sure nothing's selected. Okay. Finally, we've got the toggle switches. Now, I've got a ramp on top of this piece of footage, which you've probably seen a lot by now. I've got this ramp on top, and I want to choose a blending mode to sort of multiply it on top, so it just darkens the top bit of the footage. And so when I'm going through a tutorial, quite often people will leave comments on my YouTube, how do I get to the blending modes? I can't see them. Quite often my students in class will say, how did you get to that? This bit at the bottom, toggle switches, you click this, and in just by here all the options change. So if I want to change this to multiply, I now can, and it'll multiply this on top just to darken the sky. Let's say I've got text in there. I've done that wrong, accidentally clicked and dragged. So click, let's say I've got some text in there, and I've got it animating on the position. Let's just put a quick wiggle on there, wiggle, let's say 10 times a second by 200 pixels, so it's going to go a bit crazy. So let's say I want some motion blur on that. Well, I'll say turn the motion blur on for the composition, but then they're like, where is it for the layer? Just remember, if you can't find it, just click toggle switches and it'll go back and forth, and there it is. So now I've got some motion blur on that by there. Okay, so this is a very, very short one. I just wanted to go over 5 common mistakes in case you're just starting out in After Effects. This will be really handy. So yeah, cheers for that, and I shall catch you in the next video.